All right, well, we're live. So, welcome to another Run Wild with Us. Ask Us Anything. I am Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and RIZE Presses. And I am here with some of our amazing editors on a weekly basis, such as Rod Gilly. And we're here to answer any old questions that you may have. It could be about publishing, the art of writing, creative writing, why a horse is our logo. I don't know, whatever. I don't care. Feel free to ask. The way this works is you pop your question into the comments section. I will then repeat the question, and then myself and our amazing editors take turns in responding. So at that, Rod, how are you doing, young man?
Oh, very well, very well. It's been a pretty good week. I felt real bad for about 3 days, and
Mm,
that kind of put me behind on everything, so that was a bummer. But
got
I've
it.
done a good job of catching up, and the editing's going well. I had a lot of fun today writing a lot. I haven't had the time for quite some time to
Mm,
really get into the projects that I'm working on.
mm.
And I guess you and pretty much any writer would agree, it's freaking fun when you get the chance to sit down and write.
Well, yeah. And another one of our fabulous editors, Amy. How are you doing, young lady? I haven't seen
Hi,
you in
everybody. I
forever.
know. Oh my gosh, we've just been busy around here. We have had all of the holiday things going on, and then brand new year. So brand new kind of things we've been up to. We traveled a little bit over the holidays, so it's kind of nice to be back. And we got a little bit of ice and excitement this week in Alabama. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Wow, I bet. I bet. It's the weather across the country's been crazy.
It has, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm here in LA, and normally this time of year it's like mid 60s to mid 70s, and as for highs, which I love. And we've been lucky if it hits the low 60s. It's been very strange. Uh, and a lot of precipitation or condensation as well, which is also weird. Because we went through droughts forever. So I don't know. Tejas says, "Hey Lisa, this is Tejas. I am finally back. It is awesome to see you." Caroline says, "Hey Rod, hey guys, Rod, Lisa, Amy, great to see you." Uh, Teja says, "Is it snowing in LA?" It is not snowing in LA, although that would not surprise me if we actually had like an overnight at some point with some snow. Not at all. So, but Rod, you were talking about writing and how much you love writing. So, how's it feel to be back in the swing of things?
Oh, I love it. I'm very happy to be editing, and the business is going very well, and I'm still learning a lot. I guess I was a teenager when I realized no matter how much you think you know, don't stop learning.
Mm,
So I learned from writers, I learned from other editors, I learned from having a chat with a guy at a coffee shop. I try to keep my mind open to new information all the time. And then I take that new stuff and somehow, I don't know how it works, but I can get up to go get a cup of coffee and an idea will strike me.
mm,
And like Stephen King said one time, the good ones, you don't have to write them down, they stay with you.
mm,
And so I got this idea and it's stuck in my head. So I'll sit down and start typing. And within 1,000 words, sometimes 2,000, I'll know
mm.
if a project's really going somewhere or not. And boy, when it is, it's just an absolute thrill for me because I've said it many times, but I just type as fast as I can and try to keep up with the characters and what they're doing because I'm 100% pantser. I have no idea where the story's going. I just follow it as fast as I can, you know.
Cool.
And for me, that's an adrenaline rush. I have a ball. I love it.
Very cool. Caroline says, "It's been crazy weather. We just got back from Boston today. Absolutely frigid. Amazing how frozen college town. Riding bikes and freezing temps." That sounds amazing. I loved Boston. It's, tiny town, but that's part of what makes it magical, I think. So Amy, what have you been up to? I'm betting that you've been pretty dang busy.
Yes. So I have been working on 3 books with you guys. So lots of they're all in different directions. One is like a spy assassin kind of novel. Another one is Southern kind of folklore while this lady's trying to find her brother who is missing. And the third one is a fantasy novel. So yeah, all different types of things. I've also been writing myself lately, and it's kind of like Rod said, it's nice to have a breath of fresh air and kind of chase all the creative things going on. So yeah, I've kind of been having a blast with all of that.
That's awesome. Awesome. Hey, Ben, how are you doing, youngin? I think you're on mute or you just like talking to yourself. I mean, that could be too. Either way, it's all good. Yeah, I've got a backlog of I finished 3 anthologies or 4 anthologies. I'm editing a memoir and finishing the second round of edits to 2 novels and finishing up the third round of reviews for one of our audiobooks. And I need to actually submit a bunch of our audiobooks for this year, or not audiobooks for this year, a bunch of our books that we'll publish this year to be made into audiobooks. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I have one. I was just invited to be a part of a special anthology, which I'll talk about once everything's done. But it's should be a whole lot of fun. It's with a group I absolutely adore, and it's always an honor when you get offered to be a part of an anthology with like world-renowned writers. It's like, oh, you want me there? Okay, sure, I can do that. I have no idea why I'm here, but sure, I'm totally down. I'm into it. So, and then I have like 2 not submissions. I have 2 proposals I need to finish out and submit. So this coming weekend is going to be pretty, just crazy busy. Tejas says it's snowing in New Jersey. I came to the U.S. last year and it snowed for like a day last year. So this is my first year to experience snow, and I hate it. Snow looks so cool in the movies. I love snow, but I don't love driving in it. Like there's certain caveats to it, but I do prefer warmer weather in all honesty. Tejas asks, who's voicing the audiobooks? It's a wide variety of people. We've switched from licensing our audiobooks to audiobook companies to producing them ourselves through ACX, which means it'll be on Audible. And I believe there are a couple other platforms. So it just depends on the book. And what I suggest doing is do a Google search on the title that you're interested in and see if the audiobook pops up. If you do have a book that you're interested in the audiobook for, you're welcome to also just privately chat me or ping me, and I'll let you know if the audiobook already exists, and if it doesn't, when it's scheduled to come out, or if just your interest actually then lets us know we need to move it up in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
CJ says, hey, good evening. Got on a little late tonight. No worries. You're always welcome. I'm guessing that Ben is having technical difficulties, so he's trying to figure out how to get back on without having a whole lot of problems. So it's interesting. I don't know, Rod, I didn't forewarn you that I was going to bring this up. but Rod was emailing myself and Ben questions about structure for a book, like a series of short stories. Are you cool with us talking about that, Rod?
Oh,
Or
sure. Yeah, that's cool. Hmm.
so Rod's written two pieces that are the equivalent of like a novella length, and two that are the equivalent of a short story length. So the question became, what order should these be in the collection, and should they be a collection? And so which is really interesting. So for single author short story or single author collections, a lot of times what authors will do is either they'll pick a theme and they'll only include book stories that fall within that theme, or what they'll do is they'll have short stories that are not actually connected, but typically there's a, even if it's just that there's a it references another character that was in one of the previous stories or what have you, but there's some element that connects them for the reader, like either mentally or emotionally, if that makes sense. And what Ben had suggested was that, do the short story like uh, uh, one short story in the beginning, one short story at the end, and have the novellas in between. And that's actually a really nice structure, because what it does is it eases the reader into the stories and then kind of basically eases them out. Again, though, a lot of times when you submit a short story collection, you're going to sit there and work with your editor anyway. So most likely your editor is going to come in and either say, hey, this is great, or they may come back and say, hey, did you ever think about doing X, Y, or Z? So it's wonderful to come into it with a presupposed, like, this is what I think it should look like. But also be aware that your editor is probably going to come back with ideas on how to structure it, if that makes sense. So I don't know, Rod, what do you think? What were your thoughts around the structure of the collection?
Well, I'm always impressed with you and Ben. You know that. I'm actually, two quick thoughts. I'm very worried about Ben. Let's all say a quick prayer that he's fine, because being the
Mhm.
powerful wizard that he is, he still could make a mistake, wave his magic wand, and turn himself into a frog. I hope that didn't happen.
I'm guessing he's got internet problems right now. So
And then the second thing, real quickly, I have never had the pleasure yet. Hi, Amy.
Hi, it's great to meet you. I know I've never met you.
um, I've actually watched several shows that you were on, and
Nice.
they're very impressive. Great mind in that head, and I like great minds.
Thank you
So,
so much.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
it's nice to have you here.
I try to siphon all that knowledge, you know.
I'll send you some. No.
Well, back on topic, I started this idea quite a while back because I've been pretty busy. I got to tell you, editing 4 full-length novels at a time is a lot of work. Trying to
Mhm.
keep up where the authors aren't waiting for me to send them something, you know.
Oh,
So
that's not
I do it. Yeah,
good.
well, I do it in part. So, like, while I'm working on one part, they're working on another part. That's just the way I work. And but I don't like them to have to wait on me, because I get a little frustrated if I'm waiting on them for a long time. I'm like, don't you want your book published? So, when time and life turns it on me, suddenly now I'm the bad guy and I better get my butt to work. So, with all of that said, I really haven't had as much time to write as I would have liked to have. But the original idea for the story was based on my first published little book that was The Hero, the Fear, and the Date, which is 3 short stories, 2 of which are flash fiction. The
Mhm.
book's only 40 pages, but it's been very well received and people have said a lot of nice things about it. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a new collection because I've heard Lisa say before, it's your third book that you need to really believe will get there. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to do a really good second book and hope my novel will be ready and be a good third book. So the second book, I decided I wanted it to be another short story collection, but have 10 stories instead of 3. and under the theme of love and darkness. Each story has an element of love, and each story has an element of darkness, meaning, like evil, bad, something rotten going on. And so that was kind of the idea that started it. So I started zipping along. I wrote three short stories that are some of the best work I've done, and I've had a lot of praise on the stories from beta readers and such. So that kind of built my confidence a little bit because I guess I suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes. Uh, you know, I'll write a story, I'll believe in it. Wow, this is good. And the very next thought in my mind, will anybody else think it's good? Maybe it's
Mhm.
not so good. You know? So I suffer from that sometimes. And then I got into this fourth story for the collection. And it's really funny because I was writing and writing and following along, seeing what's happening, watching the characters develop. And then I realized I was, right around 6,000 words, and there was a ton of story left to tell. And,
Mm.
and then I thought, well, it looks like I've got two options. I want to get this short story collection done and published. And, but this is story number four. I hate to pull it out. And then, I've got three, I've got to come up with seven more.
Mhm.
But it would be so easy. I mean, right now, just ideas bouncing in my head to turn it into a novel. There's plenty of story there. So that's when I turn to people I very, very much respect. That would be you and Ben. And I say, what do you think I could do with this? And you're right, Ben, being Ben, absolutely brilliant, came up with the idea of seeing if I could flesh out the story real good, make it a complete story as a novella length that was bookended by a few short stories. And I really liked his idea, so I think I'm going to try to do that. And that was an incredible help because I literally stopped at a point where, okay, the story could end here.
Mhm.
So what do I do? Do I make that the story and then write the next short story that's a continuation of this story, you know, maybe 10 years later or something?
Mhm.
What do I do? Or, should I make it? Have you ever had either one of you? Because I know I'm rambling and I apologize. I do that chatter, chatter,
Okay.
chatter.
Mhm.
But have you ever had that happen where you're sitting down, you're writing, you're intending to write a nice short story, and by the time you get to say 4,000 words, you realize that in your mind or in your heart, oh, there's so much more to this story. What am I going to
Mm.
do? Do I stop it at 5,000 words or do I write a full length novel out of it? Have you had that experience and how did you deal with it?
I have had recently, was probably a few years ago. Let me preface. A few years ago, I had a short story published called "Spinning of the Teacups." It was with Stone Coast Review, and I love like it. It came out. It was a short story length, sweet. The ending was like, yes, I got it. And then like a year goes by and that character is just like almost like badgering me like, and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened, and I was like, oh, there's a character here that has a whole novel story to tell. So I
Mhm.
can definitely empathize. Yeah, very persistent. She was like, you need to tell this and you need to tell this. So yeah, I have one version that's kind of like a just a short story that exists by itself, and then kind of this whole expanded version that turned into a novel. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're laying in bed, you want to go to sleep, and that character's banging on the inside of your skull. I'm still
Mhm.
here.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that was the first version of Pocket Full of Teeth. So I'm yeah, very excited for that to come out into the world. Um yeah, September, Friday the 13th in September it will be out. So
Yep. And
Awesome.
very
that's
exciting.
one of the books that we're going to be working on the audio book soon. So I'm
Cool. I'm
really
so interested how it's going to happen because it's so meta. It's like a story within a story within a story. So
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
excited.
Yeah, I absolutely I was lucky enough to be the editor for Pocket Full of Teeth, and I mean what uh I think anybody who reads it is just gonna be like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I am
Thank you.
really looking forward to it. So
Yeah, I have to give you props, Lisa, because I think the best editors, and Toni Morrison was an editor, and she had kind of talked about this just throughout her life, is like good editors, they don't tell you how to fix something. They just say, hey, have you considered this part of your novel? Like this character's voice. Why are they speaking that way? What's happening here? And then just kind of like leaving you. It's very uncomfortable as the writer to have that like responsibility, but I mean, it's a beautiful thing because I'm just so excited about this book and all the things that it can do. So yes, thank you, Lisa.
Oh, completely my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. And Amy, you were amazing to work with on Pocket Full. I think we just really had a blast together. So
yeah, definitely.
Okay, Ben, are you alive?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yay, Ben.
I had to run outside and put some quarters in the microphone.
Oh, that's hilarious. How are you doing?
I'm doing better now.
Good. Awesome.
That was weird. I don't know what was wrong, but here I am. What did I miss? Repeat everything from "we can't hear you."
Well, that's not going to happen. But what I will do. So Rod had asked us a question around: have you ever gone and written a short story, and it became something much bigger than what you had originally intended? Like it just sort of expanded. So so Amy was just answering that question and just letting us know that was actually how we got the novel Pocket Full of Teeth that we're publishing in September of this year. Yeah. So how about you, Ben? Have you had any experiences like that?
Usually I'll start with one idea that gets padded around with other characters and other ideas. So yes, it has. And it's especially from it either goes that way or it goes to a quick poem like story that I have to watch out for, because when the poem gets too long, it loses energy, and I'll become very good at recognizing when poems lose energy.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah. And so you've got to even take it down even shorter, or sit down and write the longer piece.
Yeah, it's funny when I first started writing fiction, because I've been writing more journalism and nonfiction since I was a teenager. But when I first started writing fiction, I was totally a pantser, and I never knew how long the damn thing was going to be. It was always pretty random, and then with time, and you learn from reading, right, and analyzing all your favorite works, and talking to your favorite authors and finding out like what their processes are and so on. Now I am actually an odd blend of, I want to say, pantser and plotter. So a lot of times I'll come into something and I'll have an idea and a concept, and I may have a couple of paragraphs in my head, and then I'll plot it out at a high level, right? Like I'm not I think it's Tom Clancy who does such detailed notes that is almost as long as the novel itself. At the end of the day, there's an author who does that. But CJ's like, you're a plantser. We've totally made up a whole new term. Heck yeah. But I also now I oftentimes when I'm writing, either it's something like we've planned it out. So like with Cure, it'll be, what's going to be a sequel to it. And I'll have the very high level concept for it. And then when the time comes, I'll map it out. Or if it's a shorter piece, it's usually like I've been invited to be a part of an anthology of some kind, which is, I mean, a huge honor. And in those cases, so like there was one case that I was invited to be in an anthology that was to benefit an organization, a nonprofit, and it was a flash fiction, and Rod, I think every single author on the planet, if they're honest, will admit that they have that fear, right? Like, I don't know if this is any good. So poor Ben, it's usually Ben or Peter are one of the two guys who gets my work when I have that, internal fear. And so, because it was flash fiction, and for me at least, flash fiction typically will be reminiscent of poetry because of how you're using language in order for it to be effective from a narrative perspective. So in that case, it didn't turn into anything more, again, because it was more of, I would call it more of a narrative poem than it was like a short narrative poem. All that blathering said, I actually wrote a short story called Laurel Canyons for an anthology with weird tales. I'd come up with an idea, and the editor for this magazine was like, I like the idea, pitch it to us, and I'll let you know if we're into it. And thankfully they liked it. Now, that said, anytime you're pitching to a magazine, they're going to tell you you've only got 5,000 words, or you've only got 10,000 words. You cannot pass this, right? So I was like, okay. So I wrote the short story, and it's in the world of Cure. It's an extension of that world, and actually it kind of takes the primary character of Cure and makes her the bad guy, or at least that's what you think is happening when you start reading the short story. Well, when I finished it, I realized, oh my God, this could be a novel series. Like, this would make it great because it's an occult mystery. And I'm like, this would make a fantastic occult mystery novel series. And I pitched that to the editor on the side, and he's like, I love it. You've got to do it. So that's actually one of my homework for this weekend, because I keep putting off actually pulling together the pitch to go back to Blackstone Publishing, is the publishing house that publishes Weird Tales. But yeah, all the time. And usually, though, I think just from my background in journalism, where you are also taught, you got so many words, you got so many pages, and that's all you have, and you cannot pass go. You do not get $200 unless you hit these numbers. I think because of that, I learned how to, condense things so that when I'm going to publish a story that could potentially be something longer, I make sure that it's framed in such a way that you, the reader, will get a sense that this is something that could go farther, but I'll make sure that you're getting fulfillment out of that piece, if that makes sense. So we've got a ton of questions, which is fabulous. So Teja says, it would be fun if in a collection of stories, the character in one story shows up in another, playing a cameo. There have been a few authors who've done that, and they've done it absolutely brilliantly. It's totally fantastic. I'll go and look up some, and I'll send you some names of those collections. He also asks, how do you track the progress of the editors? Do you use any software, or do you write them somewhere, being old school? We actually have a huge folder mapping in Google Drives that myself, our product manager, and the acquisition editors, it's how we track where we are with the different books. And we more so just track when the book has been assigned to an editor and that it's in progress. And then every once in a while, we might check in with the editor and ask, how's it going? But we really are very hands-off. So I think, kind of back to a point I think Ben had made a while ago, I mean, this is really a partnership for us. So because of that, that means this may only go through like one review of edits. It may go through 2. It could go through 5. And the amount of time it takes for each version of those edits, it's very much dependent on both the editor and the author and how they're progressing. So we don't want to get in the middle of that. We don't want to, negatively impact that progress. Now, that said, I'm sure there will come a point where we more so actively track and tell our editors, okay, you've got exactly, 3 months to get this done or whatever, right? But right now we're not at that point in how we do things. Is there any character you wrote that made you feel you haven't done enough justice to the character? Tejas asked that. Why don't we start that one this time with Ben, since you were the last one before?
I had a character in Triggerfish 1-2, and he was actually too much for that story. He was a childhood friend, an imaginary friend from childhood, visiting Triggerfish 1-2 with his head injury in the jungle. And the recommendation from an editor was he's kind of redundant. Take him out. And I said, yeah, you're right. I'll take him out. But I liked the character, and I liked the way he looked on the page and how he sounded and what he did, and coming back to how would it be to have a imaginary friend come back when you're older and talk to you. So he spun off and got his own story. He's in the Recon trilogy. The second part is Scarecrow Angel, and it started off as in Triggerfish 1-2, and he was a spin-off character, but nobody knows that because he didn't stay in Triggerfish 1-2 long enough to know that. But so there's characters that seem to fit in one story, but may be bigger than that story and need more attention to spin off and have their own story. And actually, I had that happen in a story. It was a conversation with one of our authors. This scene adds no value to your story. Why is it here? Well, I like it. Well, then like it enough to give it its own standalone purpose, and that's what happened to that character.
And actually, that's an interesting point, because that happens in both fiction and nonfiction. A lot of times in memoirs, the author, there'll be a part of their life that it was fun, or it was interesting, or it's stuck in their head or whatever. But believe, memoirs actually do have a theme, and they do, it is still a narrative. It's still a story. So sometimes you got to pull people aside and say, I know you love it. I know that this is fabulous. And maybe we need to do something else with it, right? Because it's not really helping you in this part. So, Amy, how about you? Have you ever had a character that you wrote and you just thought, I'm not doing enough?
Yeah, I mean, I try to go after I have my first draft and get the story out. I really try to look at characters, and even characters that seem very flat or inconsequential, or just, they kind of stay the same. They are what they are. I try to dig a little bit deeper to find out exactly why they are maybe unlikable or boring or whatever it is, because maybe there's a story there. Also, it depends on who's telling the story. So if I'm not doing that character justice, there's got to be some motivation. Like, why is this main character who's telling the story telling it this way? So it can be a little complex when you're looking at character. You really have to think of like why this character is the way they are. Is it because of the narrator? Is it because I didn't do enough here? And sometimes characters are just a little bit secretive, right? They appear to be one thing, and then we find out this whole story behind them. So, yeah, I love diving into character.
Very cool. Very cool. Rod, how about you?
Well, of course, I'm the oddball in the group. It's a hard question for me to answer, but especially in any useful way, but I'll try. I get inspired. I saw a review of American Psycho, that book, and I thought, hey, it would be kind of cool to write a story about a crazy guy. And then, for no reason whatsoever, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds popped into my mind. And my story had nothing to do with the birds as it was in the movie, but just the word bird and the word crazy guy. And I started typing, and my story took off. Now, I believe I wrote a good little short story. I hope it's entertaining. But that's an example. I guess it's too vague, but I guess the honest answer is every single character I've ever written, I could add to them. I could give them more adventures. Oftentimes, I'll be sitting having a cup of coffee, and one of my characters will pop in my mind and say, "Hey, what's up? I wasn't done." And I'll be like, "Don't worry, buddy. I'll come back to you somewhere down the road." And I could probably have that conversation with every character I've written. They all had room for more. I guess just because I'm a pantser, it can just take off in any direction, go anywhere, and do anything. So there's not really much limit there. So I guess that's why that's my answer for what it's worth.
No, that's great. For me, I'm a weird blend, I think, of Amy and Ben and Rod. I have a tendency, I'll go back to read stories that I wrote in the past, and I'll intentionally pick up characters that only had a second, like they were briefly mentioned in the background or they were referenced somewhere. And then the question becomes, okay, why are they here? Who are they really? Why are they significant? And what stories do they have of their own that I could expand on? And that's how I got Laurel Canyons. That is going to come out in Weird Tales. I think it's later this year. And actually, that's how I've gotten lots of characters. It's also how I get some of the best bad guys, because when you start to understand why the character's doing what they're doing, like no one does things because they're like, you know what, I want to be evil today. So, let me go be evil. Whenever anyone does something, they have a reason, they have a purpose, and they're doing it because they think they're right. That doesn't mean that they are right. It just means that they think they're right. And so they have, so it's figuring out what those balances are within that. To me, that's a lot of fun. And what's creating those conflicts within that character and among those characters to really give you that meat to the story. So, Caroline asks, how much do you think a reader takes a story and sees it through their own eyes? What do you think, Rod?
Oh, I think you can't help but have some of yourself or some of your life follow along in the story. The way I read any story, I don't know why. Ben maybe he has a psychology background. He might be able to help. But when I read a story, if it's any good at all, if I'm going to read it to the end, I'm able to visualize the story happening. And I'll basically watch a movie is what's happening. And you can't hardly help that even though a story is very well written and very fleshed out, that the setting is very well described, there'll be elements of that setting that somehow click in your past or your life. A writer may write a little round wooden table with a brass lamp and a light blue shade. Well, my own mind from something in my past will put a pair of horn-rimmed glasses at the base of that lamp. The writer didn't mention that, but it's there. So it came from somewhere, So I think a reader takes a part of themselves into a story. I believe that.
Cool. How about you, Ben? What do you think?
I think, like Ross said, you bring in your own experiences into the experience of reading about that story. So I think it's very difficult not to, but the readers themselves are, and Rod and I had this discussion the other day, there's no typical writer, there's no typical reader either. And so the wide range of experience that a reader may have expands the complexity of their eyes that they're seeing it through. And so they can hear different things and see different things based on what other stuff they've read or what other things they've done. And so it's a matter of, don't think that they're just seeing that through their own eyes, because their eyes may be very complex, like the eyes of a fly. But and I also think that if you had asked me that before I started editing novels, I would say, oh yeah, absolutely. But from an editor's point of view, you can't. You can't see that through your own eyes, because you're wrong, and so it starts conversations, of course, but you may have your eyes open from an editor point of view, because you still have access to the author, and what did you really mean when you wrote that? What did you really mean? Yeah. And so it's there's different purposes for readers, I think, and editing would be one of them. And reading for entertainment, reading for knowledge, reading for information, reading to say, yeah, I've read everything that person wrote, so check. But there's different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Amy, what do you think?
Ben, I think you bring up such a good point, because lately I've been talking to a lot of writers about like regional dialect, which they have sort of their own view on what things should be called and like different terms. And as an editor, you really have to, even you have your own glasses on while reading, right? So you have to kind of put all of that aside and have those conversations with the authors, like, hey, you use this term here, is this what you meant? Because it came off this way. Is it something else because you're from, a certain place with, certain cultural norms? So it's neat approaching a text that way. But I do have to say, I was born and raised in Atlanta and my husband and I moved to San Diego and lived there for 5 years. And while I was there, I, absolutely loved San Diego's great. But I remember missing summers in the South because it would like smell, this way, the air gets thick, all these things about the South that I would miss. It rains, in the South, and we didn't really get that in San Diego. And I remember picking up, and this is years and years, like 15 years ago, probably, I picked up The Secret Life of Bees. And it's not one of my favorite books, but I remember reading it and just being so like homesick, but excited because I could just open the book and I could be there almost. So I definitely think a reader is going to bring those experiences with them. And yeah, when you go through the editing process, you really have to kind of pick those things apart and see what would appeal to different readers and make sure your message is coming across as well. So yeah, I've had that happen to me. And I try to do that for, writers that I work with.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. I think, of course, the reader's going to read it through their own eyes. They don't know you. They don't know your voice. And I actually have had that said, I have had the experience in the past to read something and I hear one voice and then I actually meet the author and I go back and pick up the story and I'm like, it's a completely different story, because now I hear it in their own voice, their own tone. And I know like this guy's naturally sarcastic or this guy's naturally, very literal or whatever the case may be. So suddenly it meant one thing for me here because I'm bringing my own experiences, my own knowledge, my own assumptions to it. And then I've met the author and it's like, whoa, okay. So this is not what I thought it was at all. And that's actually, I think, very cool. It's actually the same thing with, sorry, my cat's become very needy. It's the same thing with audiobooks. So a lot of times when you pick up an audiobook, and I've had authors mention this before as well, the audiobook reader or narrator, when they hear that narrator, it's a totally different story than what they originally heard in their head. And then if they write a series, they'll actually ask for that narrator, because now that narrator has become the voice of that of that world, of that collection, which I also think is very cool. So
That was
sorry.
For the Lost Song of Nina Simone with Shonda Buchanan. We actually had a Zoom call because it's a poetry collection that's coming out soon. And we actually had a Zoom call because before I edited it, I wanted to hear her read it because poetry is so much the sound of the author. And if she had read it one way, but if I hadn't heard her read it as a selection of her poems, I would have read it in my way and edited it in my way, and I would have been wrong again. So it was good to hear her voice, her work in her voice, especially with poetry in that collection.
That's fantastic. Tejas asks, have you ever written a tragic character and went, I am putting him or her through a lot, and then went ahead and made it even more tragic? Let's start with Amy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, pocket full of teeth. That's exactly what happened. She had her whole story kind of what I thought was going to happen. And then I was like, I am doing way too much here. And then I was like, you know what? I just have to follow what happens to her all the way through and just see. And I'm kind of a mix between a plotter and a pantser as well. So I'll have a basic outline, but I usually don't know the end. I try to let the characters, I put them in these situations and I try to see what they do and how they would solve it. And so if it ends well, great. If it doesn't, I mean, that's just realistic to the character. So yeah, definitely have put her through some awful things, and I am very sorry, but but it turned out great. Yeah, I'm excited.
Absolutely. How about you, Rod?
I don't know that I put my characters in anything. Well, I guess I do it from within myself, because it's said that a writer will put some of his own heart into every story. So in that way, I guess I influence my characters. But I am completely honest that when I'm writing a story, I'm following my characters. And much like me, they run into obstacles, sometimes straight into a brick wall. They make many mistakes. They encounter bad guys. They encounter oddballs, and they figure out how to deal with it. And sometimes, they'll step off of the banana, say, whoo, and trip over a rock, and that's I've experienced that in my life. So pretty much all of my protagonists get some of that out of, I guess, my own life experience.
How about you, Ben?
I've never had a character that I didn't give them what they deserved. How about that?
Man, I've read your work, so I know that's just nasty. You do not like some characters.
I've got a Christmas story where Santa Claus gets out of the sleigh and takes his machete and cuts the head off a little girl. But she deserved it.
Yeah.
Or the Halloween story where the lost boy that you think is just lost and been kidnapped shows up when they're carving pumpkins. They find him.
Okay. All right.
But they deserved it. It wasn't really tragic. It was just the story.
I admit I've never had a time when I thought, wow, I'm putting them through a lot. I just do it. So I must be more sadistic than Ben. So sorry.
Christmas story where the parts get delivered by different modes. Because if you have 2 weeks, you can go to the postal service, but towards the end of the story, the parts had to be delivered quicker, so they had to go to UPS and FedEx. Okay.
CJ says we all need a safe writer friend we can show anything to. Honestly, I've had a few author friends who their safe writer friend wasn't actually a writer friend. It was a friend who just liked to read. And so that way they could give the author that more of a reader view, whether it works or not. And honestly, sometimes it's better because, especially when a writer is still, I'm going to say like hardcore learning, they may not be able to read a work through the lens of a reader. And so a lot of the feedback they'll provide is really, in my opinion, projection of what they feel either they're strong in or where they feel they're weakest. And so it may not actually be make your story any better. It's just, it's them actually still learning. And that's, that's fine, but you need to be aware of that when you're going through those periods. So, wow, guys, it's already, we've only have we've got 10 minutes left. This flew by. And CJ, Tejas, Caroline, these questions were phenomenal. You guys really brought it this week. Thank you. That's awesome. So, and by the way, if you're watching this and it's not Thursday between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time, then you can just go ahead and toss your question into the comments section. And I am always reviewing these throughout the week. So we'll just come back and we'll answer your questions in the subsequent session. No big deal. We like coming into it with questions that we're already ready to tackle. So it makes it all that much more fun. So what do you guys have planned for the week ahead? Anything exciting?
I have some kind of cool stuff. I've started a just very informal podcast with my friend where we read books and we pair that book with a drink and a playlist. So we literally sit around at the kitchen table talking about whatever book. So I think we're going to record an episode this weekend. So yeah, I love that idea.
Oh my God, that'll be so fun. You'll have to send out links to it. Like that'll be a blast. Totally.
Definitely will. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Rod? What's your exciting plans for the coming week?
Well, I hope I can make a lot of time for writing. Got a lot of ideas going around in my head, like often occurs. But I'm also really enjoying the editing I do. I just finished working with Anatoly Malikov on A Slight Curve, my first Running Wild Press editing job, and I'm very proud of it. I think it's nice and clean, and it's a good, solid story. And it was a good experience for me because Anatoly is such a dedicated writer, and he really hammered into a lot of areas. And I feel like I learned from him as much as I could teach him. It was a very good experience. And so now I'm down to 3 novels that I'm editing. And this I guess I'll call it the second one, is likely to be done around the first week of February. The other 2 have a ways to go, but they're going wonderfully. Very enjoyable stories. And I have found over the experience that I've had, I'm very comfortable with 3 novels. So I'll be asking for another one around the second week of February.
Okay.
But I actually can, and I feel like I've been effective with 4 novels at a time. But I don't know, maybe Ben could do it, but I don't think I could edit 5 novels at once and do them justice. I think my limit would be 4. You know, can you Ben do 5 novels at one time?
You
I
put
don't think
them
I
on the
could.
plate at the same time. I don't do them at the same time. That's
Right,
different.
exactly. That's where I was going to go. Yeah, a lot of times, Brad, what some of our guys will do is if there's a novel they're really interested in and they know that in the next couple months they'll be done editing one, they may accept it and they'll just reach out to the author and let them know, like, hey, I'm going to be your editor, but heads up, we're probably not going to start working on it until, whatever, March or April or time frame. So yeah. We all do it. We all accept far too many, and then we turn around and say, "Hey, sorry, yeah, give me a little bit of time." So, how about you, Ben? What do you have coming this upcoming week?
Just started a new novel, Breakout. breakout, breakthrough,
Break-
break something.
Yeah.
And but next Thursday, there's a Zoom call I'm joining with Southeast Missouri University. They do an annual anthology of military writers. It's called Proud to Be Writings by American Warriors. And I have 2 poems in there. And so I'll join in there and join that discussion.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's,
Well,
it's volume 12 already. I've I think 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. So five anthologies that I've worked with them on.
wow, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get better at our social media and our marketing. And by the way, if anybody here is watching and they're interested in joining us as the marketing lead, please reach out to me. We could definitely use your help. So this weekend, I'm going to be working on a lot of activities around that. Also, a memoir that I'll talk about in a little bit. I'm also working on, again, the novels that I was referencing. And I have a few pitches that I need to finish and get out to those respective places. And one thing that was really cool, I was actually reached out to by Goldman Sachs, and they have a new program called 10,000 Women. And what it is it's actually a series of 10 online workshops for women founders, so women who own small businesses, and it's to kind of help you break down your business and where it can go and where you are and so forth and so on. Now, what's interesting is Goldman Sachs is pretty open about the fact that the reason they actually started it was because they realized there were all these great women-owned businesses that could really, do much more. Or expand faster or what have you, but the founders, the owners, they weren't aware. Either Goldman Sachs wasn't aware that these women and these businesses existed, or these women weren't aware. Like, here are all these different ways that they could be leveraging so that they could grow and and stabilize or whatever. So it's funny. Like, I brought it up to a couple of friends of mine, and the second, who are I know all from like corporate America and are incredibly well versed in topics such as this. And I started to say, do you think? And they were like, you better do that workshop. And I was like, okay, so now I've got my marching orders. But it is pretty extensive. So most likely what's going to happen is I need to, not most likely, I need to clear my plate of some of the stuff I've got, my plates that are currently, being juggled, so that I can really focus on this and get that in there. And I just think I'm really curious to see Goldman Sachs's feedback on us and what we're doing and how we're doing it and where we can take it. I think that'll be really fun. And then I was also dared. I am such a sucker when people I'm friends with come to me and they dare me to do stuff. But a dear friend of mine came to me and he's like, I dare you to do a podcast series like on TikTok about my experiences on trying to get my roof, ceiling, and floor replaced from the hurricanes in 2022. Because believe it or not, guys, I still don't have my flooring done in my living room from the hurricane damage that happened on December 10th, 2022. I'm still battling my insurance company over that. And sadly, I'm not the only person. From what I hear, there's quite a few people who had damages from that weather back then, who are still, fighting their insurance companies. So guys, look for that. I'm probably going to record the first one, if not this weekend, then definitely over the subsequent week. And obviously I'm going to do it with humor, because some of this stuff, like looking up, hearing a crash behind you and looking up and seeing someone's head sticking through your ceiling, I mean, that's just hilarious. It may not have been at the time, but In retrospect, it's like, oh my God. So anyway, so I've got lots going on. Thrilled to continue working with all these amazing guys. Thank you guys for joining us. And we are at the end of the hour. I hope that you will join us again next week, next Thursday between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. And if you can't, no big deal. Check out our recording. We would love, love, love to have you. So with that, thank you again. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Amy. And see you guys next time.